Meg Martin.
And I'm Corey Passons.
And we are coming at you live from the Interfaith Works office in downtown Olympia in the basement of United Churches. And we are so excited because today is our first episode of Lean in Olympia, a new show where we are going to be getting together every couple of weeks to talk about different subjects that are super important to us and I think also really important to the community during these difficult times where connection and togetherness is hard to come by. We are trying to connect with our folks as best as we can and just talk about a lot of the things that are coming up for all of us. So before we go much further, I want to just introduce Corey and I a little bit for those of you that might not know who we are and what our background is. I'm the executive director of Interfaith Works, and I have a background in social work, community grassroots organizing, and have been living in Olympia for the last 12 years, doing lots of work around poverty and homelessness, and also community organizing and engagement. Corey, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Corey Passons, and I've been in Olympia about 4 years. Came here from Seattle where I finished some theological training. I've been an interfaith minister here in Olympia for the last 4 years and just have recently come on board with Interfaith Works. Really excited to be with this organization. I've been associated with Interfaith Works through various programs over my time in Olympia and I've just always felt a draw to work and support this organization because of the diverse ways that they support social justice and because of interfaith relations. It's just a really unique commitment that I'm passionate about, and I can explain that in a little bit.
So our hope with Lean In Olympia is that we will be able to tackle issues of justice, humanity, belief, where those intersect, where they might differ, and be able to use this as a platform to bring in other voices, other organizations that might be doing rad work in our community that we really want to highlight and uplift as well. A little bit about Interfaith Works is that we have been around for a really long time in this community. Hopefully many of you who are watching have been a part of Interfaith Works to some degree over the years. Do you want to speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah. So, as I've been looking into the history of Interfaith Works, it's over 50 years of history, and it began as an association called Associated Ministries, which really was denominations of Christian traditions coming together really to do social justice work and to do peace work. The organization and the association began to develop an interfaith identity in the 90s, and then in 2004 they formalized an interfaith identity with the addition of Temple Beth Hatfiloh as a member of the association, changing the names from Associated Ministries of Thurston County to Interfaith Works. And since then, there have been additional additions to the coalition, which is now over 35 member associations and churches and faith communities. Baha'i, Muslim, Unitarian Universalist, so it's a truly interfaith coalition. Yeah.
And I think that something that makes Interfaith Works so special and really drew me to this organization was just the inherent and long-standing belief in the merit of every person, regardless of where you come from, what your background is, what you may or may not believe in, and understanding that we're stronger together than we are apart. And my kind of first involvement with Interfaith Works was really around the homeless services. And so there's the interfaith understanding, the efforts of social justice and peace, but there's also the works of Interfaith Works, which is so key and so critical. And there's a long history of providing shelter, volunteer-based primarily, that started over 30 years ago at this point. And many of our local faith and spiritual organizations and communities would open up their social halls, their sanctuaries, their music rooms, to be able to host anywhere between 10 and 25 women and families during the winter months, during the coolest winter months. And it was entirely volunteer run would rotate from church to church or building to building every 2 weeks. And so that's kind of how I got involved with an effort that we were also trying to open the community's first low barrier shelter, which was a shelter that accepted people exactly as they were, regardless of their circumstances. And we were able to combine those forces and be able to really play to the strengths of the faith community, the history of Interfaith Works, and build off of that. So today, the Homeless Services program has just grown dramatically. We have now, during the time of COVID-19, 2 24-hour shelters that we are operating. One with our dear friends and family members at this point, First Christian Church downtown, and one up at a city-owned building on a property at Martin Way in Pattison that is able to provide shelter space for people that are really at the highest risk of potentially contracting and having the most intense complications from COVID-19. We also have a really amazing case management program that's entirely peer support based. Another thing that I love about Interfaith Works is how we bring together people with lived experience to be able to share and learn from one another. And the peer support model is really around people that have gone through really hard times themselves, have been waiting in line for food stamps for a really long time, have had to replace their IDs or whatever it might be, and not have an address to be able to do that. And then coming out of that experience, you learn so many skills that a lot of people in the broader community don't necessarily have if you haven't been through that yourself. And so they walk hand in hand with our shelter guests and with folks who are unsheltered, living out in encampments, to help them connect and get access to resources in whatever way they can. So all of those things that Interfaith Works is a part of really lends itself to some super rich and meaningful conversations, and that's what our hope is with this show. Yeah,
I just wanted to add to that too. So the mission of Interfaith Works, our mission statement, is social justice and peace through interfaith understanding and cooperation. And so, Meg, I want to ask you in a minute about the really exciting 2020 Martin Way project coming up. I wanted to say a quick word about interfaith understanding and cooperation. And I had a chance to go to Lincoln Elementary School last year to talk to some second graders about interfaith. What is interfaith? And so I had to think, okay, how am I going to do this? And I started to think about the first word, inter. And so what we did is we drew a map together we did Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And they looked, kind of crazy because I was drawing. And so, but we were able to identify them. And then we said, how do you go? How do you travel from Idaho to Washington? And some kids had done it, and they're like, oh, I go on I-90, or I go on I-84, down to Oregon or whatnot. And so we said, what is that? What do you call those roads? And they're like, oh, it's an interstate. And I was like, yeah, it's an interstate highway. So what does interstate mean? It means it's a connection between two different states.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, where you get to go between them. And that doesn't mean that Idaho becomes Washington or that Oregon becomes Idaho, but there's just a way to travel between and a way to get to know them. Mm-hmm. So I'm really passionate about interfaith understanding because it's impacted my own life. It's deepened my own connection to the world. It's deepened my connection to the way I make meaning in life through some of my travels, through some of my relationships. I'm a better person. I'm a better person of my own particular faith because of the faiths of others. Mm-hmm. And when I come into contact with people who have the willingness and the energy and the humility and the excitement to get to know another human being at a relationship level, that's when the energy of our humanity, I think, just the top just comes off, and we can just do things together that we could never have imagined if we were alone or even in our own silos. So Interfaith Works is really special because they've just made a commitment over decades to say that each of these individual expressions of how we are people making meaning in this world is unique, and we depend upon each other to stay true and to expand. So I'm really excited to stand in a place where we can have conversations, we can have events that promote interfaith understanding and cooperation. We can amplify the voices of people who might not stand squarely in what you would call interfaith relationship or cooperation, but they're doing the work of broader understanding, and that's important work too. So when you go to the website, when you look at interfaithworks.org, you'll see that there really are two ways the organization understands and kind of organizes itself into interfaith relations and then homeless services. And I'm really honored to be standing in a place where I can do program management work for the interfaith relations with all of the amazing faith communities and spiritual communities in Thurston County. And we're hoping to expand our coalition too. There's work to be done to broaden the network into people who don't even use the word faith or religious or spiritual, but they're organizations of persons who are making meaning, and they're doing the work of identifying and recognizing, affirming their humanity. And that's we want to welcome that into our coalition. So I'll be focusing on that in the coming time. So that's one. I wanted to spend some time in interfaith relations. Use the metaphor of the interstate between. It's a really easy way to think about interfaith. You don't give anything up if you're Washington, but you get to experience. Travel to Idaho, and you have beautiful connections between them. And I wanted to make sure that we spent some time talking about the new upcoming expression. Interfaith Works has works attached to it, and there's a beautiful one coming up in November.
Yeah. Just what I'm thinking about when you're talking about all of that is like how vital basic human needs are in order to be able to get to that place of deeper understanding, or even like having this space and the ability to like pontificate about like what is the meaning of life, and where do I fit, and how does that play into my daily work or whatever. And I'm just sitting here being like, oh my gosh, yeah, and the basic human needs of like shelter and food and knowing that you are loved and cared for and a worthy person are such foundational building blocks to being able to grow relationships and grow networks, to strengthen the entire community. So that is what we do with Interfaith Works, the homeless services. And we always talk about how we have to come at issues like homelessness from a both and perspective. I think as humans we try to say like there's never enough and we have to prioritize, and it's either this or it's that. It's either shelter or it's housing. And for us, we believe that it has to be both. We know that we are in the midst of a public health emergency, and I don't mean COVID. I mean homelessness, and we've been there for a long time, and the pandemic has just exacerbated all of the issues that we were already working on for so many decades. And we have to figure out a way to meet the emergent, immediate needs of not only the folks who are living in encampments, in RVs, in doorways downtown, but also we have to plan for permanent solutions that are ongoing and long-lasting, and really get at the economic issues that are facing all of us and are only going to become more prevalent as this pandemic continues. So we are super excited to be breaking ground in early November at 2828 Martin Way, where the current COVID-19 shelter is, to build 65 units of permanent supportive housing, so apartments, and a new 60-bed shelter on the bottom floor. We are doing this in partnership with the Low Income Housing Institute in Seattle, as well as City of Olympia, Thurston County, and the State of Washington Housing Trust Fund. So it's a huge effort that so many people are coming and organizations are coming together to work on, and it's going to be the first official project of the Olympia Home Fund Initiative, which was passed in 2018, a sales tax initiative to provide somewhere between $2 and $4 million a year to the city of Olympia to build permanent supportive housing, specifically for the people who have the most complex challenges and for whom society has created so many barriers to make it so difficult to get off the streets and into permanent housing. So we are used to being scrappy, to being DIY, to making the most out of, the COVID-19 shelter that we opened, we converted an old podiatry and dental clinic into a shelter in 1 week, right? The x-ray machines are still in the rooms. And so it's been really cool to go through this experience, and I just think about all the shelter guests that we've had that we've lost. Like here in the office, we're looking right now at 2 photos behind us of Sergio and Adina, and they had been in our community for so long, so many people knew them, and they both passed away, and would have been the exact people that we're talking about who were getting into this building. So to be able to create a floor plan where there are multiple ADA accessible stalls, and every hallway is going to be safe and clean, and it just feels like really what is needed, but also what is deserved.
There's a bed bug room.
There's a bed bug room, yeah. My personal favorite feature is that we're going to have a room where you can just haul things in and cook them and kill all the bugs. So that'll be amazing.
That's
showers.
Justice,
13 showers.
That's
There's going to be
great.
13 showers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just feel like if we can get to a place where some of those immediate needs are met in a broader way, it helps provide this foundation for our community to enter into some of these longer lasting conversations and change that's needed.
Yeah, and the conversation piece is actually a really important component with when you have expressions of housing, what's going to happen at 2020 Martin Way. It's not going to solve homelessness in our area. And what we can do as an organization is we can, to the best of our ability, try to support or to even enact places of conversation where people are processing what does it mean to have homelessness in our community? What are the values from my own life, my family, maybe my faith tradition that motivate me to want to work on this issue rather than want to hide it, to try to ameliorate the suffering that people are going through. Right now, I think that this series we're doing is important because we're in a culture right now, we're in a moment right now where there is just such static energy polarizing people, and people of privilege are selecting issues to use as culture war and wedge issues to benefit their own base or to motivate their own base. And as we were talking about before, the concept of interfaith relations is expressly to create connections between rather than to build silos between.
Yeah.
So I am motivated personally to support, ongoing conversations about homelessness with support from the faith communities to say how can we see, and when I see I'm talking about more like the heart than the eyes, how can we see homelessness, and then how can we respond, in a way that's compassionate. And some of that might be just doing good old-fashioned dialogue. And I'm also part of a progressive clergy group in Olympia, the Concerned Clergy of Olympia. We did host some community conversations over in the southeast neighborhood about what does it mean to feel homelessness in the community. And what happens, the magic that in those conversations is not always the pragmatic part, like, well, we can raise this amount of money to build this amount of, beds to do this amount of thing. It's also about showing that I hear you, I welcome your perspective. I'm open to your perspective. I'm willing to receive you in an energy that's calm. And I trust you, actually. I trust your opinion on this topic. And starting from that place, just everything just goes like, you know. And then we can begin to shed some of the identities that become so strong and hold us back from doing the creative work that's needed to solve these just intractable problems.
Well, and become even stronger when it feels like you're being invalidated. You know, like if your own experience is being invalidated from whatever perspective it's being invalidated by, you're gonna dig in, right? Because it ends up becoming then like a survival response, basically. And I think that while we've been talking about Lean in Olympia and what we want it to be, you know, it feels really clear to, like, words for right now, right, is like, oh, it's divisive, it's scary, it's isolating, but then we're like, but it's also like really hopeful and really beautiful, and there's like this emerging of like a deeper transformation in humanity that's happening. And something that I know from my own experiences with recovery from mental health challenges and substance use challenges is like growth is never comfortable. And that's why we picked the name Lean In Olympia, you know. It's like we want to face these hard conversations and lean into it, because in the end that transformation is what's going to heal some of these like really, really deep and profound wounds that are super exposed right now. And and I think, I mean, this also is just making me think of like all of the topics that we've brainstormed about that we're hoping to cover on this show as we go forward. And so just topics of poverty, homelessness, substance use, mental health, intersections of housing and homelessness and institutional racism, and how that impacts our community's ability to thrive. We want to talk about enabling, like what does it mean to enable people by providing services or not providing services. Talk about the impact that happens in our community when so many, with the visibility of homelessness and the increase of the visibility of homelessness, that means that so many more people in our community are bearing witness to this intense amount of human suffering on a kind of non-consensual basis, right? And like that has impacts on people, and we want to talk about that and explore that more. Other like interfaith relations topics too was spending like a spotlight on meaning, talking to people about different like why they do the things that they do in our community.
Sometimes it's helpful just to have conversations that talk about how to talk. You know, like how to do it. How can we get to know each other without immediately gravitating back, you know, to the places that are hard to speak from, you know, and that create those polarities. So how to talk, and really it's so natural. I look forward to getting into that conversation. Just identifying the basic levels of humanity will start from our stories. You know, what are our stories? You know, I almost feel like all the faith traditions we have, we're just trying to get back to just being human. You know, we've gotten maybe too smart, too complex. Like there's a basic humanity, and the story is what helps us to go there.
Totally.
You know, I was thinking too earlier. You were talking about validation. I want to recognize persons who are suffering for being capable of being able to describe and teach about meaning. I think that I don't know if you were referencing it fully, so I don't want to assume that, but I've heard people talk, you know, about how the conversations that get at interfaith understanding or interfaith relations, theological conversations even, are sort of like reserved for people who are, you know, healthy or well-fed or people of privilege. And I think that there's something to be said for listening to the wisdom from people who do not enjoy privilege. I mean, the way that they understand life is a profoundly unique and important perspective
Yeah.
that can get lost, frankly, as we hang out in spheres of privilege, economically, racially, religiously. There are spheres of privilege in religion. When we hang out and those are normative spaces for us, we start to think that maybe the wisdoms that we're hearing are the full stories, and they're not. And persons like I didn't meet these people, but I've literally been like sat at the feet, of people who are suffering just like in capacities that I frankly can't fully. I can't relate. I can hear it. But how can I know that? How can I feel that kind of suffering? And I've sat and I've listened to them, and my life has been impacted by those people. Yeah. So we have an opportunity, I think, as an organization to democratize the conversation, and that might be a challenge that that could be difficult, but I think it's a worthy aspiration. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. And I think something that's so cool about this platform too is that we want to hear from you about what you want to hear about. Like if there's topics that you'd be interested in, you, the listener, to let us know what you want to hear about and how that goes. So our real goal here is just that we really believe that we need each other. We need each other to bear witness, to listen, to learn, to expand, to get to like bring in the discomfort so that we can get that growth that I think so many of us in our community are really longing for, regardless of where you're coming from or what perspective you're coming from. And so on our next show, we do have it planned to talk more specifically about COVID-19 and what that response has looked like in regards to people experiencing homelessness. And so we are going to be joined with a guest from Thurston County Public Health who is going to just talk to us not only about how Interfaith Works has specifically responded, but also what has been happening on a kind of broader county level. Who's that?
Keely Marino. Okay. Yeah, so she's the homeless coordinator, homeless and affordable housing coordinator for Thurston County.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. So before we go, we want to just make sure that you all know to follow us again. We're going to post up all the information about when the show is going to happen, but next week we are going to do our second live stream on the 25th, same time. And we really want you to check out our spiffy new website, interfaith-works.org. And there you can click the tab of Getting Involved to learn how to connect for volunteer needs. We've got wish lists there. You can navigate from that website to our homeless services website, as well as the 2828 Martin Way website to learn more about that work. We're always in need of donated items to the shelters, such as clothing, basic first aid supplies, socks, hygiene supplies. We also still are getting masks donated, cloth masks, so that we can get those distributed out to folks who are unsheltered or living in shelters. And we are just so excited for Lena and Olympia.
Yeah, we are. It's good stuff.
So I think that's all we got. See you all next week. Thank you so much.
I think that's going to do it.